Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on modeling major gift likelihood, talking about translating data into action. And today, my name is James Cousins. My name is James Cousins every day, but today I'm joined by Abigail Komlenik from Swarthmore College, and I'll be talking a little bit about her in a moment. So what we'll be talking about collectively today is, first, I'm going to share a little bit about who we are as Rapid Insight, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Abigail Komlenik, Abby, and then from there she'll be sharing with us her process of major gift likelihood modeling, and then I'll be joining you again for a software demonstration. Throughout that process, we're going to be encouraging questions. We're happy to answer them at the end. And so you should notice on your webinar screen, a little toolbar, there should be a questions panel. So feel free to send in your questions as we present, and we'll definitely save time at the end of the presentation to answer those. And so I may have mentioned, but we're very happy to be continuing our Women in Data Science webinar series. We're really proud of all of our users, in particular what some of our users are accomplishing. Most recently, we had talked about automating data prep specifically for output into Tableau. Upcoming, we'll be talking about a data segmentation approach to modeling freshman retention and the results that you can get once you dig deeper into your data and how easy that is to accomplish, surprisingly. And then you can also join us if you're interested in the journey from development records to business systems at the Whitney Museum of American Art. That was a recent addition, and so we're really excited about that presentation as well. Throughout this entire series, in fact, if I transfer into the next slide here, throughout that series, this series that we're presenting, we like to emphasize that what we feel is that data analytics should be easy, it should be affordable, it should be powerful. So what that means, or what that translates to for most of our users, is that they're able to accomplish truly critical outcomes or drive truly critical outcomes for their institutions or their organizations. And I think that, on a personal note, I have found that Abby's definitely no exception to that. The field of advancement is entirely about trying to generate the sort of funds that can help you to continue serving your mission for your students and to keep them achieving the favorable outcomes that college can bring. And so what we do is we try to contribute to those efforts in everything that we accomplish. And that means that all of our resources here are targeted towards making data prep or data analysis easy, affordable, and powerful. So what I'll be showing later on, and pieces that were critical to what Abby will be presenting, were, of course, Vera Construct, which is our tool that allows you to perform data prep and reporting very easily, repeatably, and without an extensive background in potentially software or computer packages. Vera Predict allows you to go ahead and build predictive modeling. And I think that this really, as we talk about it today, or as Abby talks about it today, this is really one of the critical pieces, is that it's probably not as far out of reach as you might think. A lot of people that didn't necessarily consider themselves to be statistical gurus are able to accomplish quite a lot using Vera Predict to build their predictive models, regardless of their outcome. And then at the end of that process, having prepared your data, having organized it and merged it, having added in a predictive score, being able to collaborate online through this cloud-based sharing platform is what Vera Bridge is intended to solve. And so this is something that our users have been using to great effect. And to step aside and to allow Abby to share what she's been doing, I will now yield the floor to Abby Komlenik. Abby, thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you, James, for the introduction, and thanks to everyone for joining. It's exciting to be here with you today to talk about what we did here at Swarthmore with our major gift likelihood model. I'm going to talk to you about that model and talk you through the process of what we did to work through our data and to build the model, and then also how we took our results and implemented them into our organization. Before I do that, I want to give a little bit of background. First about Swarthmore College. You might be familiar with Swarthmore, but in case you aren't, we're located outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we were founded in 1864, and we are a historically Quaker institution, and we're made up of about 1,600 students. So we're not huge, but we're very mighty. For myself, I joined Swarthmore in September of 2017, and this was my first big analytics project, but my role is dedicated to analytics. So when I was at Franklin and Marshall College, I worked in annual giving and was able to see all the ways that advancement is able to use data and all the opportunities there are there. So it was great to come to Swarthmore and out of the gate being able to work on this predictive model. And if you're familiar with Lancaster County, that graphic there is representative of our Amish population. So you may get the opportunity if you're driving through to take a minute and slow down with traffic before you're able to pass the Amish buggies. But back to the model, we went through a process that really started before I arrived with our research team, of which I'm a part, and that work was spearheading the case for analytics within our organization and showing the need for a predictive model to help us in our campaign, to be able to prioritize alumni, for our gift officers to be able to focus on certain alumni and really focus our efforts in our campaign targets. So that starts off with preliminary data work, and which is no small feat. We went through and made sure we understood the data that we had within our organization. So it was part of that process, just seeing what kind of fields we had, where it was stored, what we might be able to access. Then there was a process of cleaning and prepping that information. Unfortunately, nothing is stored in the perfect way for all applications, so that's always a little bit of a process. And we also wanted to explore and analyze that information to see if there were any initial anomalies or correlations that popped out, and note those down before we built our models. But then, of course, we wanted to build a model. So before we worked with Rapid Insights, our team actually did some initial building and evaluation of early models. It was part of the team's goal to not only have that end result of having a model, but to be able to tweak and customize that ourselves. So we didn't want to also build it from the ground up. So in a time of transition for our team, we worked with Rapid Insights, and James helped us to build those models, but then we were able to have some time, some ability to really understand what was at work within the predictive model. So after we went through that work, I was able to join the team and familiarize myself with the data that we had, the process that we had gone through, and our modeling. So that essentially the information that we evaluated breaks into 3 categories. So we have demographic information on our alumni, which includes things like where they're located, what their major was, different student activities. We also have giving information. Of course, that's gifts, designations, dates, all of that sort of thing. And then we also have volunteer info. So this is specific to volunteer efforts within advancement, because that's the bulk of the data that we have and have easy access to. But all of this information we looked at over the past 10 years, and that was really to that we have in relatively small institutions in the model, but so lifting comes with the prep and the scoring for our model. So what you're looking at here is our data prep job. And so this takes our demographic information, gift information, there's some more gift information there, volunteer activities, and attendance, and it takes all of that together and puts it, essentially puts all that information together, rather than doing that, coding it ourselves or going through a lengthy process in Excel. The second job takes each year of that information and then compiles that and appends it for each year. And that allows us to make sure that we're looking at each of those different years individually. That job goes out, and with that information, we're able to go into Vera Predict to do the actual predictive model, and to look for what the correlations are, what variables have different interactions, and to build the model itself. That model then comes back out, and we score it in this third job in Vera Construct. And what was interesting here is we actually found that there were two essentially different populations within our data. The 1864 is our leadership giving society, so folks who give at a level at or above $1,864. We found that there were different elements, so different factors that were predictive of them giving, and they were also more likely to be a major gift donor, as compared to people who had given less than 1864 or had never given. So with the modeling, we created two separate models and then recombined all of those folks after they had been scored with a probability. So that output is the probabilities, and this presented a little bit of a challenge for us because, as we know in advancement, most alumni are actually really unlikely to make a major gift. And so when we were looking at those probabilities, they looked, to someone who's not in the field like a really small chance. And we wanted to make sure that that work wasn't, taken under, or not really fully understood when we rolled it out. So we wanted to try to think of ways to deal with that. But then also, if we were to share those probabilities, people tend to misinterpret them. If you had looked at the weather report and it said there was a 20% chance of rain today, you probably wouldn't take an umbrella. But out of our entire alumni population, if we had someone who had, a 20 or 40% chance of making a major gift, that, depending on your alumni population, could be pretty high. So we wanted to find a way to essentially answer the question, how do we make these small probabilities useful? And so our solution was to kind of translate those numbers, and we decided to use descriptive scores instead of percentages. And this solved the problems that I just discussed, but also had the added benefit of trying to get our gift officers to action quicker. So instead of looking at our database at a score of, maybe we've had other scores that might be from 1 to 10, which can be really useful for certain types of scoring. We thought that if there was a phrase that someone saw, then they might be more likely to really intuitively understand what we wanted them to understand about that particular alum. So we have a set of 5 major gift likelihood scores that are least, less, somewhat, more, and most likely. So then when a gift officer goes into the database and they're looking at their portfolio and they see that they have a most likely prospect, they don't have to think about that underlying percentage and decide whether or not they should contact them. Most likely sounds like it's important, and that's what we want them to come away with. So our next task after everyone was scored and we had those descriptive scores assigned was to satisfy our curiosity about how this looks for all of our alumni. So we took a look across the alumni that we had scored for the major gift likelihood model, how they broke out. And it should be unsurprising that fewer alums score in those top 3 categories, the somewhat, more, and most, which intuitively sound like they're more of your good bets. But that big purple bar is kind of scary. And ultimately, I didn't want our folks to think that it was scary. And that's really because that's about 15,000 people, and given the length of our campaign, 15,000 people is too many to have to try to sort through. So this really reinforced our goal of trying to prioritize different folks. And this yellow box shows us about 1,600 people, which is much more manageable to evaluate them and hopefully our gift officers to visit. Then we also had some good news when we looked at the people who were assigned. So we took a look at the top 3 likelihood scores, somewhat, more, and most, and tried to understand what population was assigned. We have a no staff assigned, so they're prospects that we flagged, but they aren't currently assigned to a gift officer, and non-prospects. And it's a nice story that we're already looking at these top likelihood alumni because the vast majority of them are assigned. But it gave us the opportunity to take a look at those other pools, particularly the green most likely folks, and see, is there a reason that they're not assigned to a gift officer, or should we take a look at them a little bit more closely? We also looked at gift officer portfolios, and they're kind of mixed. And this was another point when we shared this with our broader office to emphasize that this shouldn't be scary. There is a lot of purple there with the least likely, and this is a good tool. Each bar here represents a gift officer in their portfolio, and it represents the number of people in that portfolio broken out by their gift likelihood score. And again, this was an evaluation tool, and it also didn't mean that we were immediately going to pull out all of the least likely people from gift officer portfolios, because as much as we want gift officers to be looking at their portfolios through this major gift likelihood lens, this is a model that only predicts major gift likelihood. It doesn't predict plan giving, or there might be gift officers who are focused at leadership giving levels. So this was just another lens to look through and potentially evaluate those folks in the lower likelihoods. And another good evaluation point was that bigger green section in the middle of the screen is our VP. And so that was a nice confirmation point that he had a lot of most likely prospects in his portfolio, as he should. And one more way to look at this is to look by capacity and likelihood. So if we look at the higher likelihood encompasses the top 3 likelihood levels. So that's the somewhat, more, and most folks. And the lower likelihood is the less and least. And then we broke out our capacity ratings, so the high capacity and low capacity prospects. And the color shows you whether or not they're assigned. And it was a nice confirmation again to see that our high capacity, higher likelihood folks are assigned, and then gives us a lens to look at that orange sliver and see, is there a reason that those high likelihood, high capacity folks are unassigned? Likewise, if someone's high capacity and lower likelihood, is there a particular reason that they're assigned and unassigned? Just thinking through those different matchups and evaluating if that's where we would like these different groups to be. Yes, so this is another great piece of news. So what next? We've got all this data, and we've looked at it through different lenses, but how are people going to use this? So we feel we've really only scratched the surface with this type of work. We were able to use this information as a portfolio review evaluation tool. And actually, my colleagues started using this information before we presented it to our entire organization in her portfolio reviews with gift officers. So she was able to show people before they fully understood what the score was and say, hey, we have this predictive score that isn't, it's showing that this one person has they're least likely to give, and they haven't responded to any outreach in a certain amount of time. Do they really belong in your portfolio? So that was a nice way to be able to prelude to the full presentation, where people then really understood how they might be able to use these scores in their work. gift officers are now prioritizing their visits and different event invites by their major gift likelihood scores. So we have different campaign events that are small, that are focused on creating specific conversations, and we want to make sure that those conversations have the right people at the table. So using the major gift likelihood score as a filter has been really productive. And finally, instead of reinventing the wheel with a separate report for major gift likelihood, we've added these scores to our common reports so that our gift officers and other members of the advancement team can just go in and see this side by side to all of the other information that they have and they're used to using. So we've had a lot of really good success with adoption of the score, and are also planning to take a look at this for this kind of process through a different model, and maybe start looking at a leadership giving model to target some folks for our annual fund as well. But we've really found that this was a great way to get buy-in from our organization for predictive modeling and data, but making it more palatable maybe to some folks who aren't ready to take a deep dive into percentages and data. So.
Yeah, thank you, Abby, for sharing all of that. And I wanted to point out that I see a lot of different applications of the applications that we provide. And it really impresses me the most to see when people really take what the tool can create, which is these predictive scores, these reports, and goes really just miles and miles beyond that by doing things like these portfolio reviews and all of the human expert side of things that I would never be as well informed about. So my hat has continually been tipped to Abby in that regard. So thank you for sharing all of that. To talk a little bit about what went into creating those scores, and to help everybody in the audience see how quickly you could also be in that position of having discussions with gift officers, of having discussions circulating around portfolio review, or really whatever ends up being the action item specifically for your organization. That's really what this is all about here. So wanted to take a moment to share with you what that would actually look like to work your way through the software, and you'll see for yourself that it really is quite easy to move through. Before I do make the transition to the actual software, I wanted to just reiterate that you can definitely continue to ask any questions that come to you as I present on either the material that I'm delivering, or definitely the material that Abby had discussed. And so with that, I will actually go ahead and move into Vera Construct. So to be very clear, it's definitely the case that Vera operates very effectively as a platform. So what we provide really can, from start to finish, make it incredibly easy to generate results for any of your analyses. Specifically today, I'll be sharing how it would look for someone going through advancement or fundraising. So you'll see for yourself here within this interface that we have connections, we have jobs, and really the important takeaway is that, as Abby had mentioned earlier on in the presentation, there were a lot of different pieces of information that she needed to connect to, or that they could possibly make use of. And so being able to connect to Excel resources, being able to connect to Access databases, as well as actual database connectivity directly, being able to bring all of that together. I'll actually pull it up and show you what that would look like. So this is a job, and the way that we help to streamline the data preparation, the reporting process, and even on a very basic level, just exploring and understanding the data, that was sort of the step one that Abby had introduced. It's very straightforward. All you need to do is build your connections, identifying the source, and if it's a database, providing your credentials. With those connections established, it's easy to sort of recreate those. You can just pull in the table that you need to work with, if it's an access table, or if you have, for instance, maybe a supplementary list of top zip codes that are most rated to be the wealthiest zip codes to know if any of your donors or your alumni are coming from those areas. You can start to pull those in. You can explore them very easily to see what's inside of those resources. You can also, if you go ahead and actually pull in the records that you're hoping to understand, you can merge together those resources so that you can start to flag people for being from one of the wealthiest zip codes, or for the behavior that the activities that they had while they were still a member, if the higher education, if they were a student there, or in another sense, if they have attended any of the events that you've sponsored. Being able to do that, it's all entirely operated through a point and click interface. It's easy to create regardless of your background, and it's also easy to explore, so that if you're putting yourself, for instance, in Abby's shoes, if you're the person who's quite competent at preparing your data, that it doesn't mean that somebody else can't weigh in. You can also sort of bring them in, and they can see that you're merging these two resources and that you're filtering down these resources. And so that you can see, I'm going to flash forward a little bit to a job that's a little bit more established. Same data, we're still working with that donor database, working with that access database, but all that we've done here is we've set it up so that it merges that, and you get this one comprehensive picture of your potential prospective donor or major gift giver. You can, for instance, calculate how far away they live or how many days it's been since you've had a point of contact with them. You can clean up your data. And again, all of this is done through that point and click interface. So if you double click, I could come in here and I could, for instance, try to clean up some of my missing data. I could replace ones with yeses or vice versa. All of this is a very sort of graphical interface. So I will move forward here so that you can see what it actually looks like. Sort of the majority of the work that Abby was presenting centers around those predictive scores. And the reality is that a lot of people feel that that's the piece that might be beyond them. You know, a lot of people feel comfortable navigating the data, even if it is potentially dirty or needs to be merged in this fashion. But once you have that data put together, building the predictive model is a very quick process, potentially, or you can make it as intricate, and you can spend as much time with the data as you want. The general experience is that all you need to do is open a file. With that, you can simply point to really any format of data, but in this case, the data set that we've just created, I want to look at that model file. I'll open it, and then to make things easy for you, again, regardless of your background, if you want to, you can go directly to the modeling process. You can identify the characteristic you want to predict. So in this case, it's whether or not somebody will give a major gift. And your organization or institution may define it differently. In this case, a $5,000 gift might be considered to be a major gift. If you select that, I think that a really big takeaway that helps to identify just how much time this saves is that by simply identifying the characteristic, the application can automatically search through the entire set of characteristics that you have. In this case, it's 27, and perhaps at the end of the demo, I'll check back in with Abby. I'm not sure exactly how many she was exploring or potentially using in her model, but simply by building automatically, it will take all of those potentially significant factors and it will build the best model that it can. And so the piece that really speaks most strongly to the operational side of this is that if stats is not your background, then you can very easily, just sort of as the human expert or as the institutional expert, you can look at this and you can ask yourself if it makes sense. So by just mousing over, you can see that this relationship indicates that the older the potential donor is, the more likely they are to give that major gift. Or if it happens to be a reunion year this year, that they are more likely to give in those reunion years. And it takes all of those factors and it allows you to explore them visually. So I think that an important element of understanding your data, as Abby was saying, is not just seeing what the data contains or where it exists on the database side, but actually also looking at certain factors like In fact, if I check this box, I can save myself time and I can only display those factors that are significant. So now I know every one of these factors that I might spend time exploring, they're all predictors of major gift giving. And if I wanted to look at something like the major that they had while they were still at the institution, again, in the case of institutional fundraising, then I can see that these particular majors are related and these ones are not. And so this helps me to see exactly what's going on in the data to maybe try and understand some of those trends if I want to. Of course, circling back, there is, of course, this possibility to go straight to the modeling process and to build that model automatically so that you can then memorize it and start to score your current prospects or your donor pool. So that's, in fact, what I'll do, but I'll encourage questions on any level of the predictive modeling side. I think as I do go ahead and memorize this, the hallmark is that you can generate these models very easily. You can understand what it's including in that model also on a very visual basis, very intuitive basis. If you don't like it, you can customize it. So it's totally transparent. We support any institutional organization's desire to customize their models and make them their own. And then once you have that model, you can save it and actually make use of it. And so, in fact, that's what I'll do here. So here within my advancement folder, I'm going to go ahead and save this major gift scoring model. And then, as I had mentioned, the compatibility of this platform really makes it quite easy to move from the data prep seamlessly into actually building a predictive model and then incorporating it. So that would, in this case, look like pulling up a list of current prospects. So maybe this is coming from one source, maybe this is coming from multiple sources, but once you have that list pulled up, you can simply import a scoring model or multiple if you wanted to try out different scores. You know, it's very flexible and you can definitely weigh out different options that you're considering. I'm going to incorporate that major gift scoring model. And then once I have that set, I can either go a couple of routes. So I can run this myself right now, and it will go ahead and take those prospects and it will run it through and give me a list of scores. And Abby was mentioning all of the things that you can possibly do from here, and I really couldn't hope to summarize it any better than she did. But another option going into those stages is that you can also schedule this to run. So if you wanted those scores to be updated on a routine basis, or as you clean and prepare a larger and larger list of prospects that you might consider reaching out to, then you can have this run automatically and continuously present this updated list for any other stage of the process. So I want to show you then what that might look like. So I have a couple of possibilities on the report side, as well as one that allows the frontline gift officers to maybe even build their own reports very easily. So the first that I'd like to show you is that a lot of times you just really need to know where you stand. And so this is a kind of an advancement status, a year-to-date status. And so all of this, acknowledging that of course it looks like maybe there was a lot of work that went into it, but I can tell you honestly that once you have an idea of what you need to track, a job like this could come together in the series of maybe 20 or 25 minutes, and then you could be looking at a report basically along these lines. Or, in fact, now that I think about it, I could actually be publishing this report online so that anybody from, you know, possibly off-site, possibly in the middle of a meeting, they could go ahead and they could log into Vera Bridge, which I actually have to pull up here. So if I'm off-site, if I'm on my phone, if I'm in the middle of a meeting, I can go ahead and log into Vera Bridge. And I've logged in the past, but it is login based. So as soon as me, James Cousins, logs in, what I can see is my dashboard. So I've just uploaded this, and what I want to do is I want to share this with all of my, maybe all of my gift officers, but I'm not a gift officer, I'm an analyst. So I want to share it with all of my analysts. So if I give them all this permission to view, I can go ahead and actually also email them to say, hey, here's a dashboard. Feel free to take a look at it. Let me know what you think. These are the numbers. If I save that, then just to give you a peek at what they might be seeing, I have last fiscal year. I have this fiscal year. This is obviously excellent news because not only has our overall volume of gifts given increased, the unique number of gifts has decreased. So our average gift size is going up. So that would indicate to me that something that we're doing is working quite well. And I can visualize that in any fashion. The other option that I have, just to quickly talk about that, is this was a pre-built report. This was something that I knew that everybody wanted to see, but I also have this ability to take these scores, and there might be circumstances where what I want to do is I want to actually upload this data set for people to be able to dashboard their own customized, personalized way. And so if I were to upload this, I can say scored prospects, and then if I overwrite that, or if I, allow it to overwrite, I can upload this. And then if I go ahead and also head back to Vera Bridge, let me take a quick peek back at my dashboards, and it's subtle, but actually it looks like already this dashboard has gotten a comment. It turns out that the people in my office do listen to me. So if I open up my comments, I can see here, for instance, actually that 2 people did. So both John and Alex have complimented my aesthetic taste in report design. And I can close that before they have an opportunity to change what they said about me. And now I can go and take a look at this data set that I've uploaded. So this is the raw data. And you could filter this so that you could maybe upload scored prospects for specific gift officers so that they could look at only their people. So, I should say they're only their prospects. But this is everybody for the present moment. And if I do open that up, then I have the ability. This is a simplified data set, but what I could do is I could, for instance, look at how many prospects I have by state just to see how regional the interest is in what I am doing. And if I sort this, then I can take a peek and see, actually, it looks like a lot of my prospects are from Massachusetts. And this is just one way to look through it. So I could also, if I wanted to, actually create more of a visualization. So I could do kind of a line chart and see what's the demographic breakdown of the prospects in my pool. And something like this I could add to a dashboard I could retain for future use. But at any rate, I do want to take a moment, step back from this, and I want to offer to address questions. It looks like a lot are coming in, and I am going to make the fair guess that probably a lot of people are curious to hear Abby speak instead of me, but we'll see about that. So let me pull it back to the PowerPoint here, and let's see. Yeah, start to field some questions. So as I said, please feel free to add in those questions. I think maybe just to make one other small effort towards actually wrapping things up, I did want to say that between the sort of results that Abby can generate through her institutional knowledge and her team, and the sort of results and how quickly you can generate them using the software, I think that really it's quite a powerful combination. And so now I will look back towards questions. And so actually I would be happy to field this, but I think Abby would have interesting insight onto this. So this person asks if you can use this software to create a model not only for major giving, but for annual giving and planned giving, for example. So I'll yield the floor to Abby on that question.
Yeah, I would say absolutely yes. So we are not quite at the participation gift level. We're working on developing a model for leadership annual giving. And something that's definitely on our horizon would be to look at planned giving as well as a potential model. I think the way that we would do that is really similarly to the way that we built the major gift likelihood model, gathering factors that we think of as indicators, whether that's gift level or different activities. If you have social media data, that would be potentially interesting. And then taking all of that in, doing that data prep, and seeing what Vera Predict thinks is relevant and what is significant, essentially. So I would definitely say yes, and I'd be interested to know what all that looks like.
Yeah, and I'll add, because I've had the opportunity to see both, fortunately, is that it's kind of interesting to see that some of the factors, so, this is a piece I didn't necessarily display just yet, but you can see on a row by row level which factors are actually related and which are not. So for instance, being on committee in this particular case for this data set is not related to major gift giving, but maybe it is related to annual giving. And so you see some of these results change based on the outcome that you choose, which is very interesting. And a thought had occurred to me as well after I had heard Abby's response to that. I realized that the big piece that you were mentioning was actually how helpful it is to create these scores, not just in the percentage format, but also through that sort of Likert scale of very likely, least likely. And so I did want to actually show you these results, and what I'll do is I'll just quickly create this sort of quintile based on probability. And if I run this now, just to give everybody a peek behind the scenes, I realized I didn't cover that just yet. What that could look like with just a small amount more work is that each person can now be placed as either the least likely or, on the other end of things, the most likely. So that's what that might look like, each individual receiving a unique score. Let's see. And then I have, wow, a lot of other questions. So hopefully I get to them all, and know that if I don't, then I'll definitely follow up with you. And then, let's see, I'll try and find another one for Abby. Actually, this might be an interesting point. So, what this person is asking if the tool only interfaces with Tableau, but I think a larger question around that might possibly be, Abby, how are you going about actually displaying some of those or exploring some of those results visually for perhaps your presentations?
Sure. So I know there is a Tableau connection, which I haven't actually set up yet. But what I am doing is taking those scores, and once I've applied some and created the variable that puts those the text scores on them, I'm taking an Excel file and actually connecting it to Tableau. So yes, all of these visualizations, for those who are familiar with Tableau, these are visualizations created in Tableau that just have the ability to do myriad different things if you're familiar with the tool. But I found that just in terms of my process, Excel was a really easy way, especially when I'm doing a lot of versions of different things.
Awesome, thank you. And there are a couple of other questions. I'm trying to make sure I capture the spirit of them. One person did have a question just as I was mousing through a particular interface of Vera Predict. They were curious about for just an interpretation of the AutoMine. So the colors here, what they indicate is if it's green, then it is related. So it's kind of handy that, whatever field you choose, if you're looking at a data set, you can see at a glance which are related. And I think in some cases, it's just helpful to be able to provide very quick answers to very basic questions like what is related to major gift giving, and that's something that you can also incorporate. Let's see, I think there's a question here about the clustering resource, and I actually don't know this off the top of my head, but I can certainly demonstrate the clustering feature here, as I believe what the question is referring to. But Abby, have you incorporated clustering at all, out of curiosity?
Yeah, that was actually a way that I looked at our the initial probability scores, because of the feature of major gifts being an unlikely occurrence. I wanted to use clustering to take a look at that data and see, where different populations were clustered around, and that was really an initial step that I took to be able to figure out where to put those buckets of text scores. So I found it to be really helpful. You can choose the different number of clusters that you're interested, and I thought it was a great tool.
Awesome. Well, I couldn't possibly think of a better explanation for it than that. And I went ahead and pulled one up with the 5 clusters. So for anyone who's curious there, it's very straightforward. You choose whichever your field is that you'd like to cluster. And um, it, earlier on in the process, you can even start to build engagement factors like combining, for instance, age with last point of contact to see, kind of create this combination factor of how long they may have known you, and then also how recently they might have contacted you. So there's a lot of different possibilities with the clustering tool here. And so, see there, another question came in regarding compatibility with another resource, so Razor's Edge, as well as Tableau, and that is also something that we can work with. So I'll field this one. I'll just take a quick step back and point out that this really is the tip of the iceberg, to borrow the phrase from Abby's presentation. And what this actually stands in for is the fact that we can connect to Salesforce, we can connect to databases if it's MySQL, if it's Redshift, if it's SQL, Oracle. So there are really quite a number of different resources that we can leverage, especially if they're the ones that you need in order to understand your prospects best. Anything that you were, any thoughts that you have on the point of connectivity or different sources, Abby?
I don't have much to add. Unfortunately, our security around our database doesn't make that possible, but I think I wish we could.
Yeah, well, and I actually appreciate you bringing that up, because that's another great point, is that we have a lot of people that can't because of the current environment and all of the security that is required for either student or alumni or prospect data. And so the ability to work with extracts is also something that people, aside from even just Abby, have also required, and something that we're happy to provide is being able to work with those extracts, things like CSVs and Excel files. And I think I might be wrong, so please keep the questions coming, but I think that might be all or most of the questions that had come in. Oh, there is one other one. So after this question, I'll turn it over, Abby, to you for any final thoughts that you might have, if you do have any. But this last question here is regarding the process of whether or not, actually, maybe I'll turn it over to you already on this one, Abby. Are you only looking at major gift donors to build your model and then applying it to your entire alumni base to see how likely they are to give a major gift based on the model? So, and I'm certainly happy to field it, but if you want to just do a quick rundown of what the process of scoring maybe looks like for you and building that model.
Sure. Yeah. So we did not just look at major gift donors to build the model. So the data prep that we did incorporated our entire alumni base. So we looked at living alumni and then went through, the building of that file, and we used the predictive capabilities of Vera. That was looking at our entire alumni body, and that created the predictive model based on the whole alumni pool, using that field of whether or not an individual had made a major gift to make the prediction.
Yeah, and I'll add, to speak to the person's question earlier who was they were asking about the annual gift, the same principle would hold, is whatever outcome you're looking at, to look at the people that did not choose to achieve that outcome, as well as the people who did, so that you can see the difference between the two. So I think that's it for questions. I'll turn it over, Abby, if you would like, I'll turn it over to you, or nope, I'm dropping a cue here. I wanted to let everybody know, I wanted to remind everybody that we have a continuing series, Women in Data Science. So certainly feel free to explore any that we have on demand, including this one. It will be available to everybody. But then on top of that, if you're curious around how other people are using our product, our platform, then you can also start to look at data segmentation in modeling, which I will say actually has sort of connections to what Abby was doing. She had mentioned the 1864 donors versus non. And so building different models for different populations sometimes can significantly increase the accuracy that you get out of your results. And so it's something definitely worth paying attention to if anybody's curious about the modeling side. And then, of course, also the journey from development records to business systems at the Whitney Museum of American Art. So we'd be happy to have you for either or both of those presentations as well. And now is when I will actually hand things over to Abby if you have any final thoughts.
Well, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming, and thank you for your questions. It was great to share our model with you. We've been really excited about it, and I hope that all of you can glean something from it for analytics at your organization. So thank you.
Indeed, and thank you, Abby, for your time and for your insight, and we hope that we will see all of you at a future webinar. Have a great day. Bye.